Hi everybody, thank you so much for being here and for ordering a box from Me and Whimsy. I'm so excited to be doing a craft box with you. My name is Jessica and I am the owner, operator, and artist behind Me and Whimsy. And my expectations for this course and project and box is to have fun with you and to learn some stuff. So let's get started. We're going to summarize what we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about what's in your box. Then we're going to talk about why you're painting the wreath form. Then we're going to talk about why I used men's shirts and how to cut up the men's shirts or your fabric in the box. Then the fun part is going to be poking our wreath. And then we're going to create some embellishments. Here we are with our wreath. This is what the finished one looks like. It has approximately 500 4x4 squares of fabric poked into the foam wreath form. Let's talk about our supplies first. Here is our foam wreath form. You can find these in lots of craft stores, but this should be in your box. It's approximately 16 inches. And you not only need that, but you need about 500 4x4 inch squares of fabric. So I did 5 different pieces of fabric, so that means about 100 of each pattern was cut so that I have enough to make all the layers of fabric going into my wreath. The pieces of fabric I'm showing you there are ones that I cut previously and have used some of. You're also going to need some paint. We'll talk about the colors of paint in just a minute. Then there's going to be here, you also need a paintbrush. You're going to need some baby wipes. I didn't put baby wipes into your box, but you don't really need baby wipes. They're just good to have around, just a pro tip there. You also might need a fan or a hair dryer to dry the paint on your wreath as you work. And you're going to need the skewer that is in your box. That is the sharp wood skewer in your box that has the pointy end. It is a skewer that you would use for grilling vegetables and meat, but we can also use it in craft projects. We're going to get into detail about how I cut up the pieces of fabric. You also have some burlap in your box, and I'm going to show you how to make these different burlap fabrics. You also have sisal rope, because that's a different type of way to make a flower. Here, burlap flowers and sisal rope flower. And there are some other things to embellish your wreath with. Some other things that you might need or need to consider when making and working on your wreath is some type of glue. I used hot glue. I didn't include any glue in your box, but I use hot glue for making of the burlap, but also fabric wood glue would work for the burlap. You would just have to wait longer for it to dry. So those are the basic supplies we're going to need, and we're going to get started on painting our wreath form. The reason you're painting the wreath form is because we want to have a background that is similar in color to the fabric we're using. I had many different options in the live in-person class I gave on this project. I'm demonstrating here with different blue fabrics and different patterns. So I'm using blue craft paint to paint my foam here, my foam form. Depending on what color you chose for your box, you will get that particular color of craft paint. You can see me plugging up my fan and letting it dry. It's important to I just did the top side first, and I'm letting it dry, and then I'm going to do the bottom side the same way I did the top side. Make sure you get into the inner area, the inner circle of the form, just so that it's nice and covered. You only really need one layer of paint. You don't need to do more than that because you're mostly covering it. Here is the men's shirt. So in my demonstration in the live class that I did for everybody, I use men's shirts. You guys just have some regular store-bought fabric, but it was important to me when I was doing the class to try not to, I like to use recycle things as much as possible in my crafts, because, well, these men's shirts are already out there existing in the world, and they might end up in a dumpster or landfill someday. And if I can keep it from happening and make something beautiful, that would be great. So here I am cutting all these seams off this shirt. I'm cutting the buttons, I'm cutting the collar, I'm cutting the serged edges, the pocket on the front. I cut the sleeves off. The sleeves can be used for pieces of fabric as well. I'm just cutting all these little seams and serged areas, or finished areas rather, off of these shirts. And then I'm going to see here, you can see I'm cutting the cuff off here. Then I'm cutting the seam off that end of the sleeve. Then I'm cutting down the bottom edge of it. And I'm going ahead and opening it up and just flattening it out, getting rid of that little button area on the sleeve. This is the task you have when you're doing, if you're going to ever use a shirt for this project. I just wanted you to know how I cut it, just in case. But you open it up and you flatten all these out. I did wash and iron all of these shirts before I started, although they look pretty wrinkled and you can't tell I ironed them, but anyway. Now I'm using a squared off ruler, I guess is a triangle, a measurement triangle here, and I'm just making 4x4 inch squares onto my piece of fabric, and then I'm folding it over a couple of times so that I can cut several squares at once. And then I'm just cutting off the closed edge of it. I'm cutting it so that I have several open squares. That was one technique, was using the squared off triangular ruler. And now I'm going to show you my template I made. I used a piece of cardboard and I made a 4x4 inch square. And this is much easier because you just fold the fabric up into several sections. I'm kind of making it even. And you can see I keep having to move my camera around to make sure I have room for all this. But then you just trace around the edge of that template and cut on those lines. I used a blue Sharpie when making my lines for this so that I can easily see it, but then also because it's blue, it kind of blends into the blue fabric. You can use a pencil. You can use I know some crafters, especially quilters and people who sew, like to use chalk or the wax pencil. Any of that would work because you can kind of wipe that away or wash it away. But unless you're going to wash this fabric again before you make the wreath, I'm just using a Sharpie that kind of blends in. Also, I mean, even if you do see some of the pencil line or whatever you use to mark these, it's not really going to be that big a deal. You're not going to see it, as you'll be able to tell better once we get started on this, but you're not even going to be able to see it. So you can see here how I folded this this fabric over. I've used a template and made 4 different squares, or traced it 4 times to make 4 different 4x4 squares. And now I'm carefully cutting around each of those shapes I made. And you can see as I go, I can kind of tell that, oh, I can make another square here, another square there, depending on how the fabric falls when you fold it. The reason I'm folding it again is so that I can get as many squares of fabric out of that one piece of the shirt as possible. I did figure out that on average, a large or extra large men's long sleeve shirt, dress shirt, can give you 40 to 50 4x4 squares. 1.25 yard of fabric bought at a fabric store can give you about 100. So it's probably cheaper to get yards of fabric. But again, I used men's shirts as a way of, I guess, of recycle, reuse, that sort of thing. So here are all my little fabric squares that I cut out of that one shirt. Like I said, it's about 40 to 50 squares. And here is the wreath. And as you can see here, again, this is approximately 500 4x4 inch squares of fabric. Okay, so now we get to get into the fun part of this whole thing. I want you to think about this circle, this foam wreath form, as a clock for placing our first few pieces of fabric. So you're going to take your pencil and your pieces of fabric here. I have all of them already cut and ready to go, like we were discussing a few moments ago. And you can see I already poked the holes here, but you are going to think about this as like a clock. And this top area where the seam of the foam is, it at the top of your wire form is where the first hole is going to go. Think of that as 12 o'clock on the clock. And then I'm going to poke another at 3. Then 3 o'clock. Then I'm going to poke another directly across from the 12 at the 6, and then directly across from the 3 at the 9 o'clock. So again, 12, 3, 6, and 9, approximately those positions, as if you're thinking of this foam form as a clock. All right, so now what you do is there are 2 ways you can do this. You take your 4-inch by 4-inch piece of fabric and you can fold it into a square like this, so that you have pointed edges, and you take one of the points, and line it up with the hole that you poked into the wreath, and then you poke the fabric gently and kind of twist as you poke it into the hole. You don't want to go too super far when you're poking the holes or when you're placing it in, because that can damage the foam too much, and you just want to be gentle and kind, sweet and kind. I don't know, however you want to think of it. This is something that you want to last and be beautiful. So just kind of getting angry at it and poking the holes real hard isn't gonna, help. but being gentle will definitely create a beautiful wreath. So here I go again. I'm going to do that was the 12 o'clock position. Now I'm going to do the 3 o'clock position. I do want to talk about which corner of the square that you are poking in. When you fold the fabric into a smaller square, you'll notice that one corner of it is the completely closed point of the square, meaning that is the point at which it is not open at all, and it kind of looks like a flower blossom in your hand. If you hold it at that point and you look at it, you'll see that when you separate the fabric a little bit, it creates a blossom, which is the whole idea behind poking this wreath with this fabric. If you use the appropriate corner and you poke it in there, it will, and then you separate the pieces out a little bit after you've poked it into the form, it creates this really pretty blossom effect. These pieces of fabric do not have to be perfectly 4 inches by 4 inches. Approximately 4 inches by 4 inches is just fine, because as you can tell, nobody is going to be like, ooh, I can tell that that's not a 4-inch by 4-inch piece of fabric there. They won't know. It just looks like a pretty plaid blossom sticking out of a wreath form. All right, so there are my 4 first ones, and now I'm going to poke holes in between each of those. So as though it is in between the 1 and the 2, on a clock, and another hole as though it's between the 4 and the 5 on a clock, between the 7 and the 8 on the clock, and the 10 and the 11 on the clock. And then you're going to get a completely different pattern than the first 4 you did, and you're going to do the same, follow the same procedure. Fold it twice into a smaller square, and then poke it into the foam form, and then fluff it out to create this pretty blossom. Now you can tell I pulled a little bit too hard there when I was trying to fix it. It's okay, you just poke it back in, again being gentle, giving it a little twist right as you poke it. Kind of gives it, I don't know, there's something about twisting it that gives it a little more strength. You definitely don't want to poke all the way through the foam. If you poke all the way through the foam, you're poking too hard. Another way you can do this, besides doing a square when you're folding your fabric, is to make it into a triangular shape. I'm going to show you that here in just a minute. Yeah, you can see on those there, the last two, I folded it into a triangle instead of a square, and then poked the corner of the closed corner of the triangle into the hole. So now I'm going to go on to my next fabric choice, which is going to be a more neutral gray blue solid pattern, and I'm just poking holes in between each of those blossoms that I've already created. And this is basically this is what you're going to do for the whole thing, except that we're creating 5 layers of fabric. I'm starting on the very top of the wreath, then I'll go to the inside curve contour of the wreath and do 2 layers, then we'll go to the outside of the wreath contour and do 2 layers. When I say contour, I just mean the curved edge of the foam form. It's not like a cube, it's rounded and cylindrical like a cylinder or a sphere, so that it has a contour when it's curved like that. So I'm just following the same procedure I showed you, folding it into either a square, a smaller square, or a small triangle, and poking the closed point into the hole you already created, so that it creates this blossom sticking up once you've poked it in. So I've sped up the whole thing here so that you don't have to watch. It takes kind of not a super long time, but anyway, something I do want to talk about as y'all watch this is I tried it a few ways. I tried just folding the fabric and poking it into the foam at the same time, not pre-making the hole. But when I did that, I realized it took a little bit too much strength to poke the hole, and I got nervous that because I had to use a little bit more oomph behind the poke, that I might damage the whole situation. Also, I put holes in a few of the pieces of fabric as I did it. So it's really best to do it pre-poke the holes. So now I've done the first top layer of this, and now I'm going to go to the inside area. Here you can see I'm showing you. I'm going to the inside area of the wreath, and I'm following the same 12, 3, 6, 9 position as I did before, like on the clock, as I did at the beginning. So now it's the same procedure. Pre-poke the hole, fold the fabric, poke it into the hole. And I'm going to do that all around the inside, alternating the fabrics as I go. Okay, so it looks like I'm here poking my third round of holes on the inside contour of this wreath form. I do want to say that there really is no wrong way to add your pieces of fabric. If you want to do a whole row of one color and then the next layer do a whole nother, it doesn't really matter. If you want them to be lined up together in the same pattern all around the contour of it, you can absolutely do that, or you can mix it up like I have done. It's really up to you. This is where you get to be creative. All right, so I have finished the inside area of this, and now I'm going to go to the next layer. We have done 2 layers, the top layer and the inside layer, and now I'm going to do a layer in between those 2 layers where you can still see some of the blue showing. So I don't know why I'm holding it off camera. I'm sorry. I think I was trying to adjust something. Anyway, so I'm just fluffing it up a little. You can see here that the more you fluff the blossom, the more voluminous your wreath will be. I do want y'all to consider that this wreath will probably be more of an inside wreath, like on your fireplace mantle, or I've seen some people do really cool things with old vintage windows, or sometimes at Hobby Lobby you can find cool lightweight wooden window frame-esque things. I'm sorry, I think I had to adjust the paper under my wreath because it was moving around and frustrating me. Alright, so I've poked some holes in for the next layer. Here you can see I'm poking the hole. I'm putting the fabric in now, and I'm fluffing it. When you poke the holes, you're always starting with the 12, 3, 6, 9 positioning. Just because starting it that way, I feel like really gives you a good visual representation of the positioning of each of the fabric blossoms, and it helps you figure out where to go next. So I've done the 12, 3, 6, 9 positioning, and then I'm going to poke some holes in between those in the middle and begin to add some more blossoms there. Okay, so I have finished this next layer. There's still empty spaces peeking through that we're going to need to fill, but we'll come back to that later. I'm just kind of fluffing them up, and now I'm going to focus on the outside edge. Unfortunately, my camera, I had a technical malfunction when I first started making these outside blossoms, but you can see here why I poked the holes and poked the first 4 positions in, 12, 3, 6, and 9 on the outside contoured edge of the wreath. So as I was saying, we've done 3 layers on the inside contour, going from the inside to the top. Now we're going to do 2 more. I'm starting on the very bottom outside edge of the contour of the wreath, and then I'm going to go up to the in-between layers. You'll see as I work here. So now I'm doing the next holes that are in between the 12 and the 3, in between the 3 and the 6, and the 6 and the 9, and the 9 and the 12. So it's just a quarter turn. You poke the hole, you quarter turn. You poke the hole, you quarter turn, and you will get your positions mostly correct. It's just an approximation. It doesn't have to be exact. Again, this is for fun, and nobody's going to be like, ooh, she put a hole where there wasn't supposed to be a hole. And even if they did, who cares? If you had fun, that's all that matters. All right, so here I am just poking those holes, and we will be back with some more in a moment. Okay, so like I said at the beginning, I was demonstrating this in the video with the extra pieces I had left over from making my original example. So I'm not going to be able to finish this all together. Here is what it looks like with still needing a whole bunch of fill-in. You can still see how I still need a whole bunch around the outside edge. I need the 5th layer to go in between the other 2. And then you just begin filling in. The goal is to not see so much of the blue. When you see an open space, create a little blossom and poke it in. Basically, once you have the positions of the clock put in, and you're just filling it in until you have it looking like this, where you have a voluminous and there's not very many spaces. Now, do I still have some spaces I could fill in on this one? Yes, but it's much harder to tell. You can see one right there, but it's hard to tell because I have fluffed the blossoms really nicely and you can't see it. So y'all can tell there that I've had to, for my camera, my little backdrop there came off, and I've had to stack my little camera on top of things to make it high enough to see this wreath. But now we're going to create the embellishments for this. We have several burlap flowers I'm going to show you, but this is what the wreath looks like when it's completed. I'm really proud of it. I really enjoyed myself making it. I hope you did too. Again, it's approximately 500 4x4 squares. That's what the back of it will look like. I don't recommend filling that in with fabric for several reasons. You don't really need to, and also when you go to hang it, if it is voluminous with fabric, it will not lay flat, or if you lean it against something, it will be difficult to keep it upright. So now I'm going to show you how to make several of these embellished flowers. I'm going to use a hot glue gun and some beads and some burlap. Sorry, I couldn't think of what I was trying to say. And we're going to get started with this. I'm going to need to let my glue gun heat up. Here is the first one, and here's another one. There's a bigger one. These are all ones that I've already created. This is a rose. We're going to start by showing you how to create that one. That one is pretty voluminous. While I'm letting my my hot glue gun heat up, I wanted to show you these cool things that I have. Unfortunately, I couldn't include these in y'all's box, but these are very helpful. These are little finger protectors for when you're doing hot glue. So I'm going to put those on. This is the one we're going to start with. I think it's pretty easy to make, but you can tell me. The first thing you're going to do is remove some of the vertical pieces of burlap thread that go through your piece of burlap here. Depending on how long you cut the burlap will determine how big and voluminous your flower is. So I'm starting on the bottom edge. You leave about a fingertip width of thread there, and then you just pull these, I said vertical, I meant horizontal, my bad. You're pulling these horizontal, the long length of the burlap thread out of the weave. Burlap comes in very tight woven situations, and it also comes in very loose ones. This happens to be a loose one, which is good. It usually comes in a pretty loose weave. So see how I took all those horizontal threads out, and I left about a fingertip's width at the top and the bottom. You're going to run some hot glue or fabric glue along that. You'll see in a minute where I burned my finger because I forgot to, I burnt my finger and I snatched it away and dragged the thing with it. I forgot to put my little finger protectors on my left hand. So anyway, here I am gluing that down. Let it dry for, 30 seconds to a minute. And then you're going to run some more hot glue along that edge and roll it up. And make sure to secure the end of it around. Want to give it some time to kind of dry. I put a little bit of extra glue on the inside just to give it a little more structural strength there. Then you kind of flatten it out or fluff it out, and then you can add your bead. You can use a bead, you can use, all kinds of things. So there's my two blossoms. You can tell that one's more voluminous than the other because one was longer, one piece of burlap was longer than the other. Here's a piece of sisal rope that I have burnt the ends of slightly. You can see I'm going to protect my left hand now because I forgot to do it a moment ago. But when you're doing this, just be really careful with the hot glue. And you're just going to roll this sisal rope around and hold it. I just put a little bit of hot glue along the length of the rope and wrapped it, and you wait about 30 seconds for it to dry. Wrap it around, wait for about 30 seconds. I'm not going to lie, these things keep your fingers from getting real burnt, but you can definitely still feel the heat of the hot glue even with those silicone finger covers on your fingers, but at least you don't burn yourself. So I'm just, again, you're just putting it along the length of the rope and rolling it around itself and waiting about 10, 15 seconds, 30 seconds until it dries. Once you get it started, it's a lot easier. It's getting the spiral started that's the hard part. So again, depending on the length of the rope, we'll decide how big your flower your sisal flower blossom is. So that's that one, and now we're going to go on to the next one. I'm trying to, you can see I'm trying to get some of the dried hot glue up. Now we're going to make this rose blossom here. Depending on how wide your burlap is, will decide how big the blossom is. I find these roses easier to make with the less wide burlap. So you fold one corner over, then you begin to roll it, and then it's hard to tell, but I'll attach pictures and stuff, the blog where I got this from, so you can see in more detail. But what you're doing is you're flipping over the burlap to kind of create a pretty rounded contoured edge, and then wrapping it around itself kind of in a uneven spiral so that it creates this pretty rose blossom. And then you just hot glue it, and there it is. There's those 3 different blossoms. You can see that that rose blossom is much tighter than the other. I tend to like my rose blossoms more loose looking. So now we're going to make this other type of burlap flower. Here is my piece of burlap, again depending on the length. If it's a shorter length, it'll be a small flower. If it's a longer length, it'll be a bigger flower. So this is similar to the other one in that you're going to pull out some pieces of burlap, pieces of thread. You're going to glue down one end of the burlap. You're going to glue down the width end, just one side, and you're going to leave the other side open. And you're going to go about 1/3 of the way up from the bottom of the width, and you're going to pull one on one string. Now you can see I pulled too hard and it pops out, and so now I'm going to have to do it again, and this time be more gentle. You're trying to kind of create this ribbony effect here. See how I go to the other end and start to gently pull there. And what happens is when you pull on it, because it's glued on that one end, it starts to wrap in on itself, and it makes its own blossom. It makes its own flower without you even having to do much. Then you just kind of shape it and then glue the 2 ends together and cut off that little piece, and there you go. And then you can glue down a center bead, or I don't know, maybe have several beads that you want to put in, different kinds. You can do all kinds of cool stuff to these embellishments here to make them your own. And then you can take these and hot glue them or fabric glue them to your wreath in any configuration you like. I just happen to like mine in the center for this particular wreath. You could always do it asymmetrical. But anyway, it's up to you how you add your embellishments. That's the fun part, being creative. Here is what it looks like without the embellishments, just all fluffed and ready for embellishments. And here's what it looks like with the embellishments. I had such a great time creating this with you guys. Thank you so much for being here and ordering a craft box from me and Whimsy. And I hope to see you guys next time. Bye!